So I'm starting with a quote from Jonathan Haidt, who's a big inspiration to me with the whole delay smartphones movement and the whole concept, which is essentially that something went horribly wrong for young people in the early 2010s. So I'm going to present that to you and talk about some of the reasons why. But essentially, I'm going to have to get rid of this, I think. So I'm just going to get rid of this here. So some parents are trapped. This is it in a nutshell. Parents are trapped. We either buy our child a smartphone and do our best to reduce the possible harms they're going to face, such as with parental controls on the phones and all the rest of it, or we don't buy them a smartphone because we know that there's all sorts of stories out there and there's lots of evidence out there how bad smartphones are for young people. We don't buy them a smartphone, but if we don't buy them one, we then see that our children socially isolated from their peers, which is a horrible thing for parents to see. So most parents choose the former and buy a smartphone. Now, my children, therefore, Daniel turned 5 today. Um, if Daniel was 11, probably he'd have got a smartphone today. So there is no judgment whatsoever from me or anyone in the delay smartphone movement about this situation. It's a terrible, terrible trap. But what the delay movement seeks to do is to release us from the trap. And essentially, we do that by working together. So we sign a pledge to wait until at least 14 years old before giving our children a smartphone. Is essentially that's how it works. That removes that social isolation and then allows us to wait. I'm going to cough. I have a little bit of a cold. So, as I've just said, we pledge until at least 14 for a smartphone, until at least 16 for social media, which does lead a lot of people just to wait till 16 for the smartphone. The delay smartphone movement provides alternative suggestions. It's got lots of evidence for why this is really important, and also it's just a great platform for us to try and work together. So as just mentioned, I've got two children. Daniel's 5 today. Lauren's still 2, just. I've been teaching for 20 years. I've been done various roles. I'm currently head of PSHE. I've been a form tutor nearly all my career, and I have seen firsthand just some really terrible impacts of smartphones. Something's definitely gone a bit wrong, and well, gone quite a lot wrong actually, and we need to take action. So here's some stories. Just literally this week, I saw these stories, and I thought I'd just put them into the PowerPoint. So there was a story. Well, it was shared with me. The British Medical Journal have just published a report that basically saying that about social media, smartphones, and teenage mental health, and they're saying a precautionary public health response is needed, and that really is my view in a nutshell. Is there's so much evidence why we can't keep waiting for this 100% proof. There's just so much evidence. Precautionary approach says let's err on the side of caution. Let's stop giving young people smartphones. A story, I think it's from the Guardian. Internet addiction is actually altering brain chemistry. So I'm going to show you a bit of research on that as well. But the MRI scans and so on are showing changes in the brain. And I don't know if you saw this in the news, but Elon Musk's Starlink is bringing the internet to remote communities, including in the Amazon, and in less than 9 months, um, yeah, these remote Amazon tribes are experiencing exactly the same problems that we are in the West: division, pornography, and all sorts of other problems like that. Okay, so 4 main reasons why we need to delay smartphones: mental health, cost of time, addiction, and unforeseen perils. So I'm going to show some evidence now just to make the case to you why I think it's so important to delay. So this is a graph that Jonathan Haidt and others often refer to. It shows the steep rise in self-harm that started around 2012, really. I mean, it's a precipitous rise. It's really significant. It's actually nearly more or less a doubling for boys, but girls obviously are more afflicted by this. I've seen this in education. This is a real impact. You know, this is a measurable impact. Children being admitted to hospital with injuries from self-harm. Um, Next one, suicide rates sadly have also increased over the same period. Boys more than girls because boys tend to use more there's a word here somewhere, yeah, more irreversible methods than girls. So we've got a rise in suicide taking place again from around 2011-12. And this is a worldwide trend in all sorts of depressive symptoms occurring amongst young people. Um, we've got teens in the UK, teens in the US, depressive symptoms, I'm a likable person, and a rise in people who disagree with that statement, all sorts of measures. And this stuff has been measured and is measured over many years. There's definitely, I would argue, from these graphs been a change. Then here's a global study from Sapien Labs, massive sample, nearly 28,000 people. They found that the later the age at which young adults first got the phone, the better their mental well-being when they're adults. So there again is, there's a causal impact being shown there, and this speaks to one of the criticisms that people sometimes make. They say these sorts of diagrams, these graphs, these are correlations, but how do you know this is smartphone? Well, as this study's shown, the younger the age that the young adult received the smartphone, the more likely they were to experience negative thoughts and outcomes. So again, okay, you could argue there's a correlation, but that seems to suggest causation as well, especially with the trends being stronger in females than males. But there's also experiments that have been done that indicate causality. So here's a study where a group of college students, one reduced their use of social media, the other didn't. 4 weeks later, depressive symptoms were measured. The limited use group, the group that used social media far less, basically stopped using it, shows significant reductions in loneliness and depression. And then another study just below there about Instagram images, essentially showing that girls who were exposed to more manipulated images on Instagram after a period of time, they had a lower sense of body image than the girls who've been shown original unmanipulated images on Instagram. So again, that's actually indicating a causal impact. And we kind of know this, don't we? We know that if girls are on social media, bombarded with image manipulated images of extremely attractive, in inverted commas, girls, they're going over a period of time to start to feel less confident in their own body image. It is obvious, but it's supported by evidence. Right, cost of time, life, and learning. So this is a great quote, I think. The cost of a thing is the amount of life which is required to be exchanged for it immediately or in the long run. So that's basically opportunity cost, isn't it? The cost of a thing is the amount of time, the amount of life which is required to be exchanged for it. I mean, and the amount of life that teenagers, young people are exchanging is extraordinary. So 5 to 8 hours a day are spent online during childhood. I think the UK figure on average is more like around 5 hours a day. That's extraordinary amount of time, isn't it? 5 hours a day on average every single day, 1,000 to 2,000 hours a year. What would the young person be doing otherwise if they weren't spending that time online? Now, just to point out, I'm not trying to say that all time spent online is negative. There are benefits to being online for us as adults and also for young people. But they're just so addictive that the sheer number of hours is far outweighs the benefit, I would say. Here's a study. Norwegian schools they banned smartphones on school grounds, and they found that the maths grades went up. So essentially, why is that happening? Well, one argument could be because the children are spending less time, on their phones during the school day. Overall grades are improving. They found, time since the ban. Bullying levels dropped. Mental health consultations dropped. That is just one of so many studies showing that when the smartphone's taken away, young people experience improved outcomes. Okay, next, addiction and social withdrawal. So, um, the algorithms now, um, I mean, well, not just now, they've always been like this. They're designed to push us and children and teenagers in this instance into rabbit holes of toxic and harmful content. Why? Because the toxic content is more addictive, it's more likely to attract eyeballs, attention, and then we've got features like infinite scroll and so on. And that's in the design. They're designed that way. That's the only way they can be free is by people spending hours and hours a day on them. um, and yeah, they're highly addictive. So um, about 237 notifications a day, children on average are receiving, which is an extraordinary number. And again, I've seen that myself as a teacher. A phone is confiscated, and if the child, because they've been using it, say, at break time, which I don't like to do in my school, we confiscate it. It sits on a desk, and we have to put it away. If the child's forgotten to turn it off, we have to put it away somewhere because it's just beeping and vibrating constantly with notifications, which obviously the child is going to be getting in their pocket. Very, very distracting. Nighttime addiction. There's lots of studies now showing it's impacting sleep. Children are sleep. The amount of sleep they're getting is falling. Um, then we've got this here indicating uh, again correlation, but look at it. I mean, it started before the advent of the smartphone proper. The iPhone came around 2007, 8. But then around 2012, that's when social media really kicked in. That's when it became very sophisticated, far better at capturing the attention of teenagers, young people, or all of us, really. So time spent face to face by young people was already reducing. Um, but Jonathan Haidt talks about that, and he says that's to do with he thinks that's to do with parents being more concerned about their children being outside, being more protective. But nevertheless, it's a very, very steep decline here. Um, I mean, it's declined as well for adults. Very worrying. I find this graph very, very worrying. Okay, and then we've got unforeseen perils. So three here that I mentioned: digital dementia, porn, and WhatsApp. So digital dementia is not a term I'm particularly familiar with, but essentially it's a bit like that news story I showed you near the start, which is they really are starting to see now that the brain is being altered by um, by by the smartphone, by screen time. So they did MRI scans of young children. Screen time reduces the size of brain areas responsible for visual processing, empathy, attention, memory, and early reading skills. Really frightening stuff, supporting some other evidence that suggests that attention spans are reduced by excessive screen time, and that may be impacting learning and exam grades. Apart from anything else, I mean, it is we do think it's making our children more stupid, frankly. Um, then we got, I mean, porn. I mean, this is just an awful quote about 5-year-olds on school buses being shown porn by older students. Not much, I mean, not old, right? 8 years old. But I mean, very sadly, as soon as a child has a smartphone, it's very likely that they will see pornography. Either they'll find it deliberately, or more likely it'll be shared with them by an older child, or they'll just come across it by accident. And obviously, it's quite exciting. It's quite dangerous, and that's quite attractive to children. Obviously, it's very, very bad. So 51%. This is a study from the British Board of Film Classification 2022. 51%, so just over half of 11 to 13-year-olds have seen pornography online. Very high number. Nothing like this was happening before smartphones were given to children. Nothing like this at all. Most of us remember that it would be a pornographic magazine, um, perhaps stolen from a newsagent or given or bought by an older child and given to a younger child. I mean, but the comparison between a pornographic magazine, being looked at by some young, boys in a bus shelter and watching videos, pornography. I mean, it's just not really comparable. And we are seeing a rise in harmful sexual behavior, um, a rise. I hate to say this, but a rise in um, uh, girls being choked during sex or even when being kissed. Just crazy, awful things are happening. 90% of girls and 50% of boys say they've been sent explicit pictures or videos they don't want to see. That's from Ofsted 2021. So we're being told by all these different sources, all these different places about all these terrible things that are happening. And they're happening almost exclusively via the smartphone. The smartphone is the portal by which children are accessing the internet without restrictions. And it's just terrible. Someone said this to me: as soon as you give your daughter a smartphone, we're basically inviting her to be sexually harassed by her peers and friends of her peers. And again, as someone who works in schools, I know that is the case. Very sad to say that. And they're receiving requests for nudes. I mean, can you imagine your 12 or 13-year-old daughter walking down the street and somebody just walking up to them and asking them to send them pictures of them in the nude? I mean, that would be, I mean, my mind boggles, yet that is what is happening online. As Jonathan Haidt says here, the smartphone is very, very different to a phone. A smartphone with all these apps is a portal to God knows what. There's some awful statistics around children receiving videos of beheadings, for example, just to give another awful example. But I'm sorry, but that is the truth. Now, WhatsApp, the last little bit to talk about in terms of some research. So I think parents, understandably, we think WhatsApp, the way we use WhatsApp is a great communication device. I use WhatsApp all the time, but the way children use it is different. So one of the worst things is cyberbullying. So cyberbullying is huge on WhatsApp. Um, Girls actually, some evidence show girls do a lot more cyberbullying than boys by excluding girls from groups, inviting them to groups, then ignoring them in the group they've invited them to, all this kind of stuff. So here's a study: 30% of participants said they personally experienced cyberbullying. Um, the language they use, I mean, we're guilty of this as adults as well, but children even more so. Foul and abusive and racist language that they were using, death threats, all kinds of stuff like this. And also, of course, there's no escape. At least in the past, when you got home, you couldn't be bullied in your own home. If you got a smartphone, then you can be bullied constantly. So this piece of evidence is just explaining how difficult it is for schools, and the police actually. So um, as a school, we're powerless to track down a man from a phone number. This is from Fulham Cross Girls School, um, and if you report things to the police, about girls, often it is girls. Although, as you may have seen in the news, sextortion as well is increasingly happening to boys, where they're having images tricked into sharing compromising images of themselves because they think they're selling it to a girl, but they're not, and then they're extorted for money. It's very, very difficult to be investigated because often it's from people who are overseas. And of course, as it says here, it's often too late. They've already seen the thing that they've seen. Um, yeah. So WhatsApp encryption, very difficult. The messages can disappear. You can delete them. They're gone unless you've screenshotted it. Got multiple groups. So people just, I mean, I'm on WhatsApp groups. I don't actually know 100% everyone who's on that group, but I feel not too bad about that. The young person might feel similar, but they are way more vulnerable than I am. And they might be on a group and they might be exposed to things that they shouldn't be. They might reveal their location, which is point 4, via WhatsApp to people on the group. If they don't know who's on that group, well, you can imagine. So, and that's just saying a bit more about that as well. So, sadly, the evidence for these 4 harms, and there are more harms, but just for these 4, it just keeps coming day after day. There's more and more studies and evidence showing that this is happening. And I think it would be foolish to think that our children aren't going to be exposed to these harms if we give them a smartphone. But to repeat, there's no judgment here. If you're if you're in this trap whereby if you don't give your child a smartphone, they're socially isolated. Well, most parents, including probably me, would take our chances and get them a smartphone, and then do our best to try and reduce the harm. But it's very, very difficult. So, what to do? We need to delay. Is obviously my main point. Um, I've created a Corpus Christi parent pledge, and that's going to go out in an email which will be sent tomorrow. And I'd invite you to pledge, to delay, to not get your child a smartphone until at least 14 years old. Now, um, let's not beat around the bush here. I mean, after Corpus Christi, we're going to go to different secondary schools. Who knows what will happen after that? But I mean, Corpus Christi as a smartphone-free environment, who doesn't want that for their child? Then also sign the Delay Smartphone Pledge, which I showed near the start of the presentation, which is on their website. Support my stand at the summer fair. I'll be there on June 15th. You could become an ambassador for the Delay Smartphone movement, as I am, and so is Alessandra. Um, if your child is in year 5 or 6, I suggest you get in touch with your secondary school, find out what they're doing, because a lot of people are mobilizing around this. A lot of secondary schools are changing. Get involved in Smartphone Free Childhood, join Free Range Kids. That's another great organization. You could write to your MP, although I think right now things are pretty hectic. But you can still put it out there. And if anyone comes around door knocking, raise this issue with them. Let them know that on the doorstep, as they say, we're talking about this. I just want to talk a little bit about if your child is in year 6 and you've already bought them a smartphone. I don't know if we've got any parents right now on the call who are in this situation. Again, I totally understand why that would be the case. Daniel turned 5 today. If he turned 11 today, I probably would have, today I probably would have get him one. But I really would strongly suggest not doing that. So if you have got them one already, think about taking it away from them. Now I know that's really hard. I've said that many times. But how to do it? Well, first of all, explain to the child with evidence why you think they'd be better off without it. But this point here, try to connect with other parents, other family members, other people to do it together. Because if you can act together, that's the key, I think, to this. And that's why, obviously, I'm presenting today. Excuse me. And also consider a reward of sorts. So, Um, over time, it's a huge saving to be made by replacing a smartphone with a brick phone. The brick phone costs about 30 to 50 quid. The data plan will be tiny. That saving, give the money to your child. Get them things with that money and show them that. Rather than a 600, 700 pound smartphone, get them a brick phone and use that money as a reward. If you really don't think you're able to take it away from them, as I said, totally understand that. Then you've really got to look at some controlling the smartphone really tightly. I think far more tightly than you might realize. I would actually say to you, why not make it an at-home device? Take out the SIM, give them a flip phone to take to school if you're worried about contacting them. Give them a GPS tracker, put it in their bag so you can see where they are if that's a concern for you, and just have the smartphone at home as a little communication slash TV player slash video game device, but just keep it at home. Never allow them to have it in their bedroom at night, ever. Perhaps consider only having them use it in the living room. Don't even have it in the bedroom at all. And obviously, of course, the parental controls. Now, the children do find ways around them, but they are pretty good, especially if you're limiting screen time significantly and restricting the apps. So, yeah, those are my suggestions. Okay, that is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope I haven't put you off too much there. I'm going to stop the recording and then we can move to Q&A. So any questions you've got whatsoever, I will more than happy to answer them as best I can. And Alessandra may want to offer some answers too.